Ego spends to be seen, wisdom spends to be free. You can impress others or you can build wealth, but rarely both. True success doesn't shout, it shows in your peace. Chapter 7. Ego and Financial Decisions. How ego makes us spend more than necessary. The ego is one of the most influential yet least acknowledged forces behind financial behavior. It quietly shapes the way we spend, save, and make decisions, often without our awareness. When the ego becomes involved, money stops being a tool for stability or growth and begins to serve as a symbol of identity. The goal shifts from meeting real needs to projecting an image, fulfilling expectations, or proving something to ourselves or others. This is where unnecessary spending begins. The ego thrives on recognition. It seeks validation, approval, and admiration. And because money can create visible symbols of success, it becomes an easy way for the ego to feel acknowledged. People spend more than necessary, not because the purchase truly adds value to their lives, but because it adds value to the story they want others to believe about them. A car becomes more than transportation. It becomes a declaration of status. A house becomes more than shelter. It becomes a statement of worth. Even everyday purchases can subtly shift from practical to performative when the ego is in control. This dynamic often leads to overspending, not because people crave luxury itself, but because they crave what luxury represents. The ego convinces them that appearing successful is as important as being successful. And so they choose the more expensive option, even when the simpler one serves the same purpose. They upgrade out of pride rather than need. They purchase to be seen rather than to be fulfilled. The danger is that ego-driven spending rarely aligns with long-term goals. It sacrifices stability for appearance. It prioritizes momentary validation over lasting peace. And it often results in financial stress that could have been avoided. The ego does not consider consequences. It focuses only on self-image. This emotional impulse can quickly turn into a pattern, one where a person spends to maintain an identity they feel pressured to uphold. Many individuals who fall into this pattern are not irresponsible. They are simply responding to an emotional need. They want to feel worthy, respected, or admired. These desires are human, but when they are met through financial decisions, the results can be harmful. Overspending becomes a silent burden, one that grows heavier as the gap widens between the life a person is projecting and the life they can sustainably afford. When you begin to recognize the role of ego in your financial choices, a subtle shift occurs. You start to question the motives behind your spending. You pause before upgrading. You reconsider purchases that once felt automatic. You begin to ask, is this for me or is this for the version of myself I want others to see? This simple question exposes the difference between genuine desire and ego-driven impulse. Releasing the ego from your financial decisions does not mean rejecting enjoyment or eliminating comfort. It means choosing intentionally instead of reactively. It means seeking fulfillment instead of validation. It means allowing your self-worth to come from who you are, not from what you display. When you embrace this perspective, money becomes a tool again, one that supports your growth, not your image. The ego will always whisper, urging you to impress, to upgrade, to compete. But true strength lies in seeing beyond that voice. Financial wisdom begins when you recognize that the deepest form of confidence does not need to be advertised. It is quiet, grounded, and independent of external approval. And when you make decisions from that place, you spend less, not because you lack desire, but because you no longer need to prove anything. In the end, Learning to separate the ego from your financial life is a profound act of self-awareness. It frees you from the pressure to perform and allows you to act with clarity, purpose, and authenticity. And as your decisions become more aligned with your values, financial peace becomes not just possible but inevitable. I spend to prove I can. One of the most subtle yet powerful financial patterns is the urge to spend not out of necessity or even genuine desire, but out of the need to prove something to ourselves, to others, or to an identity we are trying to uphold. The statement, "I spend to prove I can," may never be spoken aloud, yet it quietly shapes countless financial decisions. Beneath it lies a complex mix of pride, insecurity, aspiration, and the longing for validation. For many people, spending becomes a form of self-affirmation. It says, "I have made it," even if only for a moment. It is an emotional declaration disguised as a financial choice. When someone buys something expensive, they may be signaling capability, abundance, or independence. The item becomes evidence of success, a tangible reminder that they are no longer struggling, or at least that they do not want to appear as if they are. This mindset often traces back to earlier experiences. Perhaps there were moments in the past when money felt scarce, when choices were limited, or when someone felt overlooked or underestimated. As adults, spending can become a way to rewrite that history. Buying something impressive becomes symbolic. It proves that they have overcome the limitations of the past, even if the purchase itself does not contribute to their current goals. However, spending to prove capability carries hidden costs. When the motivation behind a purchase is emotional rather than practical, the satisfaction is short-lived. The sense of accomplishment fades quickly, leaving the person searching for the next external marker of success. This turns spending into a cycle, not of joy, but of reassurance. Each purchase attempts to soothe the lingering doubt within. Am I enough? This is not a sign of irresponsibility. It is a sign of humanity. People want to feel competent, secure, and respected. They want to believe they have progressed. The challenge arises when these emotional needs are met through financial choices that undermine long-term stability. The desire to prove capability can lead to overspending, debt, or the pursuit of upgrades that offer identity, but not fulfillment. There is also a social dimension to this pattern. In a world where success is often judged by appearance, many feel pressure to demonstrate their achievements visibly. A lifestyle becomes a statement. A luxury becomes a symbol. The ego whispers that admiration is earned through display. And yet, the people who appear the most financially confident on the outside are often the ones struggling the most internally. To break this cycle, self-awareness is essential. When you pause before a purchase and ask yourself, "Am I buying this because I truly want it, or because I want to be seen having it?" you begin to reclaim control over your decisions. This simple question brings clarity. It separates personal desire from social pressure, fulfillment from performance, intention from impulse. It is also important to recognize that true capability does not need to be proven. It is demonstrated quietly through consistency, wisdom, and stability. It is reflected in choices that support your future rather than your image. When you internalize this truth, spending becomes a conscious act, not an emotional declaration. Letting go of the need to prove yourself through purchases does not diminish your worth. It strengthens it. It allows you to build a life anchored in authenticity rather than performance. It frees you from the emotional weight of comparison and the financial burden of maintaining an identity. And it opens the door to decisions that align with your values, not your insecurities. In the end, the most powerful statement you can make is not, "I spend to prove I can," but I choose what serves me. This shift transforms not only your finances, but your entire relationship with yourself. It replaces the need for external validation with internal confidence. And with that confidence, your financial decisions become clearer, calmer, and far more aligned with the life you truly want to build. Why discreetly wealthy people outperform flashy wealthy people. There is a quiet truth about wealth that is often overlooked in a world captivated by appearances. The individuals who build lasting financial strength tend to be the ones who do not feel the need to display it. Discreet wealth, calm, measured, and internally anchored, consistently outperforms the kind of wealth that relies on visibility and external approval. This difference is not accidental. It reflects two profoundly different relationships with money. People who project wealth outwardly often base their financial decisions on perception. Their purchases are meant to communicate success, confidence, or superiority. Their lifestyle becomes a stage where money is used as a prop, and because the performance must be maintained, the spending never seems to stop. The result is a fragile form of wealth, impressive on the surface but vulnerable underneath. Discreetly wealthy individuals behave differently because their motivation comes from a deeper place. They are not driven by the desire to impress others, but by the desire to build security, freedom, and long-term stability. Their purchases reflect their values, not their ego. Their decisions are guided by purpose, not performance. And because they are not compelled to constantly demonstrate success, they can focus on preserving and multiplying what they have. This difference in mindset creates a significant financial advantage. Discreetly wealthy people spend less on image and more on assets. They avoid the emotional pressure to upgrade constantly. They keep their lifestyle below their means, allowing their wealth to compound. Their choices reflect patience, discipline, and clarity, traits that quietly but powerfully shape long-term outcomes. Meanwhile, those who seek to display wealth often find themselves caught in a cycle of consumption. Each purchase sets a new standard that must be matched or exceeded. The emotional need for recognition becomes expensive. The gap between appearance and reality widens. And although the world may see them as successful, their finances often tell a more complicated story. They are building an image, not a foundation. Discreet wealth, by contrast, is rooted in genuine confidence. These individuals do not feel the need to prove anything because their identity is not tied to what they own. This emotional freedom allows them to make wiser decisions. They can delay gratification, resist social pressure, and remain focused on their long-term objectives. They are less reactive, less impulsive, and more strategic. Another reason discreetly wealthy people outperform others is that they protect their energy. When you are not preoccupied with maintaining an image, you have more mental space to think, plan, learn, and create. You are not distracted by comparison or competition. You direct your attention toward growth rather than performance. This mental clarity becomes an asset more valuable than any visible symbol of wealth. The path of discreet wealth also nurtures emotional well-being. Without the pressure to constantly impress, life becomes quieter, simpler, and more intentional. Decisions align with reality rather than perception. You are free to build a future that reflects your values rather than the expectations of others. And in this calm, wealth grows, not only financially, but emotionally. In the end, the distinction between flashy wealth and discreet wealth reveals a profound insight. The loudest wealth is often the least stable, and the quietest wealth is often the most enduring. One is fueled by ego, the other by intention. One seeks validation, the other seeks freedom. One impresses today, the other thrives tomorrow. When you release the need to display success, you gain the ability to build it. And when you choose the quiet path, rooted in purpose, discipline, and self-assurance, you position yourself among those who not only grow their wealth, but keep it, expand it, and ultimately live in the peace it was meant to provide. The power of financial humility. Financial humility is one of the most underestimated strengths a person can possess. In a world that often celebrates excess, visibility, and image, humility may appear quiet or even unremarkable. Yet it is precisely this quietness that makes it so powerful. Humility allows you to make decisions based on reality rather than ego. It keeps you grounded when success grows, focused when options expand, and disciplined when emotions attempt to interfere. In the realm of money, humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. Humility begins with acknowledging that you do not need to have all the answers. Financial markets shift, opportunities change, circumstances evolve. Those who believe they are invincible often take the greatest risks, driven by an inflated sense of certainty. But those who approach their finances with humility, accepting that they cannot predict every outcome, tend to prepare more carefully, diversify more wisely, and protect themselves against unnecessary exposure. Their humility becomes a safeguard, quietly preventing mistakes born from overconfidence. Humility also allows you to learn continuously. When someone believes they already know enough, growth stops. But when they recognize there is always more to understand, they remain open to better strategies, new perspectives, and wiser guidance. This openness compounds over time, creating a deep reservoir of knowledge that supports stronger decisions. Humility does not diminish intelligence, it enhances it, making space for ongoing learning and reflection. Another profound strength of financial humility is the way it shapes your lifestyle. Humble individuals do not need to prove anything through their purchases. They are less tempted by the pressure to impress, upgrade, or compete with others. Their spending becomes intentional rather than performative. They choose what adds value instead of what adds attention. This restraint creates room for saving, investing, and building long-term security, habits that quietly but powerfully shape their future. Humility also nurtures emotional stability. When you no longer tie your identity to what you own, you free yourself from the highs and lows that come from comparison. You stop measuring your worth through external symbols and begin anchoring it in who you are. This emotional independence strengthens your decision-making because you are no longer influenced by the need to maintain an image. Humility clears the noise, allowing you to act with clarity and purpose. One of the greatest advantages of financial humility is its relationship with patience. Humble individuals do not expect overnight results. They understand that wealth built slowly is often the most durable. They embrace consistency over spectacle, long-term growth over short-term excitement. This mindset helps them stay committed through uncertainty, volatility, and temptation. Their patience is not passive. It is intentional, strategic, and grounded. Humility also strengthens relationships. When ego is removed from financial decisions, cooperation becomes easier, conversations become clearer, goals become shared rather than competitive. Humility encourages transparency, trust, and collaboration, qualities that are essential when managing money with partners, spouses, or teams. Instead of trying to dominate financially, humble individuals work toward mutual growth and stability. Perhaps the most remarkable power of financial humility is the peace it brings. Humility removes the pressure to appear successful and replaces it with the freedom to build success authentically. It eliminates the fear of judgment, the stress of comparison, and the burden of performance. It allows you to pursue wealth with intention rather than insecurity. And in that freedom, your decisions become lighter, wiser, and far more aligned with the life you want to create. In the end, financial humility is not about having less. It is about needing less validation. It is about recognizing that your worth is not determined by your possessions, your status, or your appearance. It is determined by your discipline, your integrity, and your ability to make choices that honor your long-term well-being. Humility does not make wealth smaller. It makes it stronger. It builds a life that is stable, clear, and deeply grounded. And in a world that constantly pulls people toward ego-driven decisions, choosing humility becomes one of the most powerful financial advantages you can ever cultivate. True success doesn't shout, it shows in your peace. At the end of all conversations about ego, image, and financial decisions, one truth rises above the rest. True success is quiet. It does not need to declare itself, display itself, or seek applause. It reveals itself through peace, through the calm confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. When you reach a point where your financial life supports your well-being rather than your ego, success becomes less about what the world sees and more about what you feel within. This form of success is subtle. It appears in the absence of worry, not in the presence of luxury. It is reflected in restful sleep, steady decisions, and a sense of stability that cannot be purchased or performed. Peace is not dramatic. It is not loud or impressive at first glance, but it is deeply powerful because it represents alignment between your values, your behavior, and your long-term vision. When you no longer feel the need to shout your achievements, you free yourself from the constant pressure of performance. You stop living for the approval of others and begin living for the well-being of your future self. The ego no longer dictates your purchases, your lifestyle, or your definition of success. Instead, you act from a place of clarity, grounded in what truly matters. Peace becomes the natural outcome of a life built with intention. This inner peace also brings emotional strength. When success is quiet, it is stable. It is not shaken by trends, comparison, or external opinions. It does not rise and fall with the market or the temptation to impress. It is rooted in discipline, humility, and self-awareness. This is the kind of success that endures, the kind that supports you during uncertainty and guides you toward wise decisions. Financial peace shows up in practical ways as well. It looks like having savings that protect you, investments that grow steadily, and a lifestyle that matches your values rather than your vanity. It looks like freedom from debt that once felt suffocating. It looks like making decisions without fear or urgency. It looks like choosing opportunities based on meaning, not desperation. True success also transforms your relationships. When you are no longer proving your worth through possessions or appearances, your interactions deepen. You connect more authentically because you are not hiding behind symbols or status. You become more generous in spirit, not out of obligation, but because you have created emotional and financial space to give. Peace enriches every area of life, not just your bank account. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this quiet success is the way it reshapes identity. Success becomes personal, internal, and purposeful. You define it based on what brings fulfillment, stability, and meaning, not based on what draws attention. You begin to see that the greatest form of wealth is the ability to live according to your values, without being controlled by external expectations. And while this kind of success may not draw loud applause, it creates something far more valuable. a life that feels whole, a life where you can breathe without tension, choose without fear, and grow without pressure. A life where peace becomes both the result and the reward. In the end, true success does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition or validation. It settles quietly into your daily life, into your routine, your choices, your emotional state. It shows itself in your calm, your clarity, your groundedness. And once you experience this kind of success, the need to impress fades away. What remains is a sense of freedom that no purchase can match. Because real success is not measured in what you display. It is measured in the peace you carry within you. Silence the ego, let freedom speak. There comes a moment in every financial journey when the greatest obstacle is no longer lack of knowledge, opportunity, or even discipline. It is the ego. The ego insists on being seen, admired, validated, and recognized. It pushes you toward decisions that feel impressive, but do not serve your long-term well-being. It convinces you that your worth is tied to displays of success rather than the quiet strength of stability. And in doing so, it limits the freedom you are working to build. To silence the ego is not to diminish yourself. It is to step into a truer version of yourself. It is to shift from seeking approval to seeking alignment. It is to replace the impulse to impress with the desire to grow. When the ego becomes quiet, your financial life becomes clearer. Decisions that once felt complicated become simple. Purchases that once felt necessary lose their appeal. The noise of comparison fades, leaving only the sound of your own priorities. When the ego is silent, freedom begins to speak, not in grand gestures but in subtle, powerful ways. It speaks through the calm of knowing you are not controlled by impulse. It speaks through the confidence that your financial choices reflect your goals, not other people's expectations. It speaks through the discipline that once felt restrictive, but now feels empowering. Freedom speaks in the space you create between desire and action, between emotion and decision. This freedom is not loud. It does not need to be displayed. It exists in the steady rhythm of intentional choices. It grows with every moment you choose prudence over pressure, patience over impulse, substance over appearance. It becomes the foundation upon which you build not only wealth but a life shaped deliberately, not reactively. Silencing the ego does not mean rejecting enjoyment or ambition. It means choosing enjoyment that aligns with your values and ambition that is sustainable. It means acknowledging that true security is not found in what you show others, but in the stability you create for yourself. It is a shift from external validation to internal fulfillment, a shift that transforms not only your finances, but your emotional experience of life. Freedom speaks most clearly when you understand that success does not need to be performed. It needs to be lived. It needs to be felt in your peace, your confidence, your stability, and your ability to make choices without fear. When you no longer act to impress others, you begin to act in a way that honors your future. And in that alignment, wealth takes on a different meaning, not as a symbol, but as a tool that expands your possibilities. The ego will always whisper. It will always tug at your decisions, urging you toward the visible, the immediate, the impressive. But when you learn to quiet that voice, you unlock something far more valuable: the voice of freedom. A voice that guides you toward choices rooted in clarity, wisdom, and intentionality. In the end, wealth built with a silent ego is wealth that lasts. It is wealth that supports you, guides you, and opens doors without closing your peace. It is wealth that reflects discipline rather than performance, purpose rather than pride. Silence the ego and you allow freedom to lead. And when freedom leads, your financial life becomes not only stronger, but truly your own. If you believe this chapter could help someone, feel free to share it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe. Your support truly helps us keep creating more content like this.